We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. I doubt anyone's watching within the first second. There's usually a bit of a lag, but if anyone is watching or watching it back, don't forget, if you're watching through YouTube, we do have the Ed and Tech TV channel on YouTube. If you like, subscribe, share. If you're on LinkedIn, if you repost or reshare, and if you want to ask any questions, you can do. I'm led to, and I say this every week, and I always forget what it is, but I'm led to believe that to ask a question, you either have to press enter twice or you have to press something twice in the comments. The question will appear at this end, and then we can talk through it. We can see it before we share it on the screen. I know there's a few people from my football past that probably try and stitch me up on LinkedIn, so it's a good. I can see them and just vet them. So I'm just going to go over, Sophie, really quickly, what Ed and Tech Live is for anyone who's watching for the first time. So Ed and Tech Live was born out of a newsletter that I started producing on LinkedIn. It's now got just under 1,000 subscribers, called Ed and Tech Times, and it just gathers news from across education and ed tech. Several people asked me about different ways of presenting content. Not everyone likes to read, so I've started including more video content in the newsletter. But we also produced Ed and Tech Live, which is just a chance to spotlight leaders in education and ed tech and their products, schools, or the way they work. So it's nice and easy to digest, and I have a different guest hopefully every week. But I think the last week was cancelled through illness, so I do miss the occasional one. So what I usually do, Sophie, is discuss how we met, but we've never actually met in person, have we?
So, not yet. No. We've got a date for the next bet, haven't we? We're gonna have a coffee date.
It's always bet is the best place to meet anyone in this space, because there's so many people go. So we'll definitely meet at bet, but I can't remember the order. Did one of us reach out to the other one?
That was right. I think I might have reached out to you. I'm doing a bit of a LinkedIn offensive, and I'm trying to connect with as many different people in the industry as possible. So I think one of my messages might have crossed you, and then we had a really interesting call, didn't we? Where I spoke about StoryZoo, and you shared your insight into the EdTech world.
And there's definitely some synergies, isn't there, between what we do. So fingers crossed, this is the start of us working together on some other stuff. And we'll be meeting again next week. I'll be in Sweden, but
yes,
but we'll be meeting again next week. So do you want to just share a bit about yourself and what it is you do, Sophie?
Yeah, so I'm Sophie Hayes. I work in South East London as a Year 3 teacher. I'm still in school currently, as well as running StoryZoo. I've been a qualified teacher for coming up 8 years now. But before that, I was a dancer, so it's a career change for me. And I've always been interested in how education is as an industry and how it runs so differently to other companies and industries that I've worked in. So I've always had that little niggle in my head that there's better ways of doing things. There's other ways of us being able to use our time more effectively, basically. So at the beginning of this school year, September, I really ran with an idea that I've had for a couple of years, which is a digital reading platform. There's a couple of sides to the coin, really, to get children engaged in reading. Because in the Southeast we've noticed, and I think it's across the country, that there's a real drop-off in children reading, and it's just not as engaging as it has been in previous years. And then also to make teachers' life easier, because I feel like the whole industry is set up to make our lives as hard as possible. And it doesn't need to be that way. And there's solutions that we can make to really make a difference. And then equally to make it as inclusive as possible, because everything is so ridiculously expensive. There's no money in any of our budgets to spend on this wonderful technology that people create. So that was always in our head, that we needed to keep it as affordable as possible. So that's from September to now in May. It's been a bit of a whirlwind journey. into the ed tech world, but I've learned on my feet, and I think I've made a real transition from teaching as well. But I like to keep my classroom days as well, because I think that's really important. It gives me credibility. It gives me a first-hand look at how the product is working. And
yeah, I've said this before on this podcast or live. So Dave, who I work with, always says that the best compliment you ever get is somebody saying to you, "How long do you teach for?" So it definitely adds credibility to what you're trying to do. And I'm amazed that I didn't know you were a dancer previously.
I was, I was a
Totally,
dancer. So I think that really gave me another look into. So things are very efficient in that world, and they've run that way for quite a long time. And because of how, because I suppose it's an additional value product. It's if people have got money left at the end of the month, then they go to the theatre. So you're always working with. You've got to get people the best for their money. So when I then became a teacher and I saw some of the products that we were using, I was thinking, we're paying an awful lot of money for subscriptions that maybe one or two members of staff are paying for. That's not, it doesn't translate, it doesn't make sense. So I think that side of my career has really impacted how I think about EdTech, and how I think actually we need to make sure that customers, and they are customers, but ultimately children, are getting the most out of our product for a reasonable price. And then I think as well, I taught, this is going quite off topic, but I toured with a circus company that went into special educational schools. And I think that side of it as well, I think you see the disparity between the children and what the children have to work with, and that to me is not acceptable. It has to be accessible to all children of all needs. It's a real driving force of the Story Zoo team as well.
Tom, who works with us, I'm going to look to Dave, my colleague, because I might get this wrong, and I don't want to do anyone a disservice or over-egg it, but I think it is his nephew dances Billy Elliot, Royal Ballet.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
And then somebody else who I've come across in business, not in EdTech, in sales. They work for a group called Sapiro, and She Loves Social, so they do a lot on social selling. But I believe Megan's still, I think she's still Moulin Rouge. I think they live in France. I think they live in France. So there's definitely some transferable skills, which I would never have thought of before.
I know, it's a bizarre one, isn't it? When I'm talking to the children, when we have like career talks and I talk to them, I think actually you never know where life is going to take you next. So those transferable skills are, and I sound like my mum now, but get your A-levels.
Yeah, that's
you never know where it's going to lead.
So all the learning and stuff that you've done, probably in a really short space of time, because I've been there and I know how it works, and it's on your feet. What's been the best bit of, or the best part of? You are a co-founder, right?
I am a co-founder.
What's the best part of co-founding a business in the EdTech space, in your experience?
I think the networking and the getting to talk. So my conversations with people like you have been invaluable to my learning in the business space. The networking for me has been, and it's also helped to develop our product as well, because you get to see so many different opinions and so many different points of view that it really helps to develop the product. I think that's been huge. But the best part for me is seeing the children use our app. My little case study in my school, which was the first, back in January, was the first class to use it. The buzz and the excitement that Story Zoo created around reading was exactly what I set out to create in September. And then seeing that grow, seeing that in other schools, and just really hitting the nail on the head. We set out to solve a problem in schools, and that problem is being solved is the best thing that you can see. So for me,
it's imperative now. I've got a bit of flack in the past for saying on these podcasts that if you rewind 4 or 5 years, maybe 6, because we've had COVID, selling was easier. Schools had a bit more budget. they bought nice to haves. That doesn't happen anymore. If you don't solve a problem and you're not clearly aligned to the problem you're trying to solve, it's really difficult. In fact, I think
Exactly
it's near
that.
on impossible, actually.
I think in times gone by, we had subscriptions that nobody was actually even using. They just
Yeah.
slipped through the net. We'd signed up for something, or a member of staff had signed up for something, but then just the subscription kept rolling. But now it's the budgets are so tight, and so much of it needs to be spent on children with SEND needs, that we are that product that fits that hole, and we're solving the teacher's problem that we have no time, we're solving the pupil's problem that we can't engage the children. So I think that that's really important to us, that we do all that, but at a price point where we're not impacting the budget, because ultimately it affects the children. They're the ones that end up with no whiteboard pens. So it does us well to make sure that we solve that problem for schools.
And if anybody's listening to this and thinking, Story Zoo sounds great, the idea of today is to really spotlight Sophie's journey and what Sophie's learned and any skills that you can pick up from that journey. We have had a conversation before this about spotlighting the product. So over the coming weeks, we'll do that, and you can have a look at the product as well. So from the experience, or from your experience, what's been the biggest challenge so far then?
The biggest challenge is conveying the impact that the product has, that our app has, getting in front of the right people, talking to the decision makers, which I think has changed in the last 5 to 10 years as well. We're not talking to necessarily the same people that we would have been speaking to in the past. So really finding the right person that has the bravery really to try a new product, because it's so integral to the running of the school that to make that jump is quite a bold decision. So that's been our biggest challenge so far, and we've had more success on LinkedIn than anywhere else. So making those real connections and just having conversations has been our biggest success so far.
I agree with that for us as well. We get a lot of joy through LinkedIn, and I think part of it is because more and more people are using the platform, and I think part of it, and this will be the same for you, is because our primary driver is to build a relationship. So it's not to sell the product. It's we genuinely want to understand, what schools are experiencing, what challenges they've got, all that sort of stuff.
That's exactly.
And if our product's not a fit, then it's not a fit.
Exactly, and it's a choice, and schools need to have, and academies need to have that choice, because what works for one might not work for another. But I do always say, picking up on that, I'm the worst salesperson. I'm not a natural born salesperson at all. So I get into these conversations and I end up going, well, we just try it for 6 months and let the children, because it doesn't come naturally to me. But because I believe in it so much, I think that has been my driving force, that comes across. It's quite a natural thing to come across. I've built it because I really want to make a difference to children that are reading, and I'm a mum as well, so I'll hold my hands up. I haven't written in their reading records since January, I'm sure. So I need to go back through and backdate it, but so I have that side as well. I think making anything guilt-free for parents is a win-win. It's really important.
I fell into the trap of drawing in my daughter's reading record. My youngest daughter's.
Oh no!
And the first time I did it, that was like it had to be done every single day. So and I couldn't draw the same thing I'd ever drawn before. And there were like crabs in there and hobby horses and love art.
You've got to do tutorials now.
Got something different every time, And if I missed one, I think I can remember going to a parents' evening. And the teacher even signalling or signposting where I'd not drawn in the reading. What happened here, Chris? You've not drawn in the reading record. You had a bad day. You had a bad day. Or did Sarah do that one? Sarah's my wife. Did Sarah do that one? Because there's nothing drawn on it.
Not up to the standards.
That's it. Well, she might be watching. She also works in a school, so I'll be careful what I say.
My drawing skills are definitely not up. I moderated for Bexley for a couple of years as well, and so I know the type of comments that teachers want to see, and I still find myself writing read with mum. It's terrible. It's such a trap, but Story Zoo takes all of that out of your hands and just makes life a little bit easier.
I saw a scary stat. I'm going to take the question off the bottom because we digressed a little bit. But I saw a scary stat. I'm sure it was from the National Literacy Trust, saying something. I'm sure it said 1 in 5 children or young people don't have a book at home. I mean,
Yeah, it's so
that's
sad. So
mad.
when we did our research back in September, we found that as well. And I actually couldn't believe that that could be true. I'm not Mum of the Year, but we have quite a few books in our house, and so I put it out to my school, and I'd say we're sort of a mid demographic. We have children of all different backgrounds, but I'd say over 10 of my children had not one single book, not one.
Yeah.
And I did wonder where all the books from my book corner were going. And I think that actually it wasn't through carelessness or not wanting, it was because they didn't want to send those stories back. They wanted to keep them. They became quite attached to those stories, and that just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
I also think that children don't know necessarily, and some parents don't know, that there's libraries and there's public libraries and you can go for free. And that doesn't translate at all, because we are fortunate enough to be in a city, like a town centre, where we can walk to the library. And the children were amazed. Like, I can take this book, I don't have to pay, I can take it home. And I was like, well, yes, you can, but you do have to bring it back.
Yeah.
So the accessibility to literacy and to different types of text is so sad, it's so poor.
Yeah. You said children from different backgrounds. You mentioned children from different backgrounds. Do you think some of it's down to parents with different backgrounds as well? And I'll give you some context. So I live in an area that if you drove into the village I live in from the north end of the village, you drive down, like, it's literally Millionaires Row. You know, like, you've got, it's one of the most expensive postcodes in the city that I live in and all that sort of stuff. You're driving from the other end, which is closer to where I live, and it's full of working class families.
Yeah.
And I did some research a few years back. I matched up data from IMD, Index of Multiple Deprivation, against outcomes, and there was a more direct correlation between, this is going to sound really obvious, but between education, skills, and training domain than there was finance. And loads, and in fact, nearly every education measure is finance driven in that sense. So we've got free school meals and we've got IDACI, both of which are finance driven. But in my village, most or a high percentage of the parents will work longer hours, 2 jobs, to live in that area. And that means there's less time spent with the kids, I think.
Yeah.
Is that something you echo?
Yeah, I think definitely it's definitely the same where we are. And I think that the parents are ultimately trying their absolute best. They're trying to work, they're trying to keep up with the homework. And I think that it's just that one thing that just drops off the end. And I think that the guilt is there as well. And most parents are aware that and I do as well, I think, oh, I should be doing more, I should be exposing them to more, but I'm working and I'm trying to run a business. And so I think that typically people think, oh, it's people that haven't got the time, or they're not bothered, or they don't want to read with them. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think the desire is there. I think it's a time and a money situation that we can't keep buying endless books. We have a limit on our income, and I don't think they always know where to turn, or maybe that's not quite clear enough that there are free options out there and there are resources that you can use to help. I've had it with parents in my daughter's school as well. She's in year 2, and the lack of understanding. So these parents are affluent parents, but they're coming up to doing their SATs, and the awareness of the resources that they can use. So I'm like signposting, you can get this for free, you can do this for free. It's just, it's not through a lack of want, it's just through a lack of understanding and opportunity. And that's what I really want to try and bridge. I want to make that really clear, that we're not shaming anyone. The want is there. We just want to be able to put the resources in your hand, make it easier.
And as we talk it through, it's so scary, because if you can't read, other subjects aren't accessible either, are they?
Exactly.
So you're going to struggle to do an assessment or a test in maths and science and that sort of stuff. It really is a gateway to other
Absolutely
subjects.
amazing. And I think the confidence, I see from year 2 to year 3, if that reading age hasn't developed and they haven't developed the confidence, then their confidence takes a knock, and they don't have the same attitude to learning, or the same enthusiasm for learning as children that have accessed that reading. And I think it's our job now to broaden the scope and say, okay, I need to make sure that I'm getting you there. I need to put the resources in your hands to make sure that you continue to develop. I mean, me myself, I hated history in secondary school. I couldn't think of anything worse than sitting through a history lesson. Now I'd love to go back and redo it. And I think that's just the change of my attitude. And if we don't intercept those children when they're little, we're building in those confident knocks, and it's a really sad situation. And my husband is in secondary school, so he sees the other end of it. He sees the children that come into year 7 and don't have the reading skills to be able to access the curriculum, and the curriculum doesn't wait for you. It keeps on rolling down that hill.
It does, and if you miss bits out, you've got to catch it up. And
COVID showed us that, didn't it? The COVID gaps were immense in our area. We're still plugging away at those gaps, and I think that's really taught us a lesson on how we need to keep those children up rather than letting those gaps.
Definitely, and probably one for a different day. But the approach from schools was so disparate for a number of really valid reasons. But my eldest experienced through COVID. She was in a secondary school. Her learning was really disrupted. My youngest, her school, great. They were on the phone every day. They were and I'm not digging anyone out for a number of reasons.
It's a postcode lottery, isn't
it? More
it
difficult,
really depended where you were.
I'm gonna switch the questions around slightly, because I think that conversation we've just had leads me into so jumping back to Story Zoo itself.
Yes.
What's the overarching mission or driver? I think we've touched on some of this.
Yeah, so our one clear mission is to get children to love reading. Get them reading, get them engaged, give them the widest range of texts that we can: history, geography, science, fiction, all the different genres, and just really get them reading, get them engaged. It's been our driving force from the beginning. And then to follow that up is our accessibility. We are free for SEND pupils forever. The children of our team are pupils with SEND, so that's hugely important to us. That will always be one of our main driving forces. But get them reading, get them engaged, get them reading bedtime stories every day, and then their learning and their enthusiasm just skyrockets.
Yeah, definitely. Gotta love reading. I love reading. I don't do it often enough, but I do love reading. So if you were looking at your journey, what advice would you give to anyone else who's looking to, I know you're still teaching now, but looking to transition from classroom to EdTech, or a bit of both?
I'd jump in with both feet. Just go for it. Really jump off the ledge and take the risk, because I think the risk to yourself personally is always gonna the impact that your product has is always gonna outweigh the risk that you've taken. And I think that even in our short journey so far, the impact that I've seen on the children that have used our product has been well worth all the stress, and has been well worth all of the slightly more rocky times of the journey. It's already paid dividends, and that's not physical dividends, emotional dividends. It's already made an impact in my life personally as well. So I think my advice is to go for it and talk to as many different people from as many different backgrounds as possible, because I think that their advice and opinion, even if they're not ultimately going to use the products, their opinion and their guidance might send you on a different pathway. And I think that's been really helpful as well.
We've I definitely echo that. I actually echoed it, didn't I? I did it twice. We founded a number of products now across myself, Dave, and Tom, and every time we've done it, we've got better at listening to schools, and I think we've almost got that down to you've got to speak to the people who are in it and kind of use it. Definitely, which I think is what you were saying. So,
and the children
how
as well.
much?
The children are our harshest.
Yeah,
Children as well. The children are our best critics. Like, they are the best bug spotters, the best developers that I could ever ask for. So they've got a direct line to my email and they love using it. So definitely
and
involve
brutally
the children.
honest. They're brutally honest as well.
So brutal. But it's exactly what you need to hear. And I think sometimes adults are honest, but they have a way of saying things, whereas the children go straight in for the jugular. They're ready to tell you.
Definitely. How much, if at all, do you think it's been an advantage having the classroom experience you've got and had?
Oh, it's been invaluable. The rest of the team, I can't underestimate their impact on Story Zoo as well. We've got one of the best developers in the country who is working on the back ends and the student side. I've got Ben, who's my co-founder, who has been in business longer than I have and has like a wealth of experience. But my classroom experience is and still was and still is the driving force for Story Zoo. And the constant feedback that I get, I don't know if I would have known the hole that needed filling unless I had been in the classroom myself and experienced myself as a teacher the long road that it is to collate reading data and to improve results. So absolutely invaluable. That's why as well I still want to keep my classroom days, because I think the development side of it, education is constantly evolving, but at the same time seems very stuck in the ways of the past. So I think it's good to have a foot in both industries to really keep on top of it.
I haven't met the developer, but I have seen
I will introduce you.
I have seen the product and it's really clean.
He's incredible.
Big shout out. It looks
and
really
our
clean.
our designer as well, Claire's done a wonderful job. The visuals are so inviting as well. So a big shout out to her as well. But John and Ben, and then our business partner Peter as well. Just a really great team, like the best of each industry working together.
Yeah, definitely a benefit. So I usually end on 2 reasonably quick fire questions, and we've gone over the 20-25 minutes, which always happens as well, which I think is a good thing. I think it is a good thing. So the first quick fire question: something that you've seen, and you'll have seen stuff firsthand because of your classroom experience that's made you go, "Wow, that's making a massive difference."
For me, it's White Rose 1 Minute Maths. It's made a huge difference in the classroom. Sabotising, I think, was my dad used to sabotage, and then it sort of disappeared from the foreground, but it's come back, and it's having a massive impact on the children's mathematical thinking. I've gone a bit rogue there because I've gone from reading to maths, but it's free as well, and for me, being free makes a huge difference. I'm all for free.
White Rose is great. It was born out of one of the hubs, wasn't it? One of the maths hubs, I think.
And I think sometimes it's hard to stick to a scheme in all its entirety, but this app you can use no matter what scheme you're using, and I think the children find it so accessible as well. I get my kids doing it, and it's such a quick burst. I mean, we all know how short attention spans are, but a quick burst, here we go. What numbers are these? My son's 5. He can sabotage, but then equally my daughter's dividing, doing her times tables. Amazing. It's free. You can both do it on your iPads at the same time, and I get the results at the end. So
I always find with that question that everyone steers clear of their own product or their own stuff.
Well,
like,
of course,
I can't do it. I can't say it's me. Everyone steers clear. And then the last question, well, second to last, one book or podcast that you'd recommend to everyone listening, and why. You can have more than one or one of each if you want.
Yeah, so I have got two, because the first one is a bit. If it was one of my children saying, I'd say you're trying to suck up. But for it's yours. Since I connected with you on LinkedIn and I've listened to yours, I just think the insight and the understanding that I get from a range of different people has been really helpful for me. Really interesting people, really casual conversation. It's exactly what you need to hear.
Thanks, that's really nice.
The more formal podcast I would choose is the EdTech podcast I listened to back in September, but much more businessy. I quite like the conversational. The conversational one for me is better, but I have learned a lot more understanding on how people view AI and the challenges that we might face creating AI generated books. Fortunately, we've got a team of teachers that edit the books, so although that sort of disperses any uneasy feelings about it, but listening to Rose has really made me understand, because I think the way that I've entered the edtech industry, I'm quite open to AI and the technological advances, but I can understand people's reservations, and that's really helped with my sales pitch, I suppose, and how I broach those concerns.
I think it's one of those, isn't it? It's not going to go away. You tend to find it's probably the biggest technical revolution in probably my lifetime, if not ever.
Exactly.
And if it's get on the bus or get off it is usually how these things go, innit?
And I think children are much more open to that. Well, obviously in history it's evident, but are much more open to that development in technology. And I think that we need to encourage the children, so we need to educate ourselves. And I've always found that as a teacher, I need to be open, because the children are going to, like 99% of their industries that they're going to go into are going to use AI in some sort of way. Like they're going to be using it. So why not equip them with the skills now and make sure that I'm up to date with it? So yeah, that's been my useful one.
A connection of mine on LinkedIn is a recruiter. She specializes in recruiting females into tech roles.
Right.
I mean, she obviously recruits across all genders, but she specializes females into tech. And I read a post a few weeks back. She'd been invited to the Salesforce. Is it called the Salesforce Tower? I think. No, sorry. She'd been invited to the LinkedIn building in Dublin. It wasn't. Wow. Forget Salesforce. It wasn't that. It was LinkedIn building in Dublin. And she came out with a stat that was, I think, 85% of jobs that will be available in 2 or 3 years' time aren't there now.
It's mad, isn't it? But when I think back to when I was at school, the technology was like, no, we had the old telly on the wheels. That was about as far as we got. So in 30 years, the difference is amazing. So we really need to equip the children, and they're so open to it. They're so excited. I'm getting John, our developer, in to do an assembly linked to the trust, because the children just want to be coders. They want to be developers. So let's train them. Let's get them there.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be cool. So there is a last question. I've found this really great speaking to you. It's like
thank you so
easy.
much
Just
for having me.
Done it. And if anyone else is watching this and goes, I need to speak to Sophie, I need to look at Story Zoo, where can people find you? Where's the best place to get in touch with Sophie?
I'm everywhere at the moment, so I'm really pimping myself out. But LinkedIn is my main one. So we've got the Story Zoo page, which you can find quite easily, or search for my name, Sophie Hayes, and I'll be there. Open to conversations, just discussions, or even if you just want to give your opinion. I found it so useful just talking to people. So I'd love to have conversations with you. Thank you.
Amazing. And I'm just going to cap off by saying, you mentioned earlier, free to SEN pupils. So
yes,
if a school is wanting to look at Story Zoo for just their SEN pupils, is that a possibility?
No strings attached, absolutely no strings attached. So pupils with SEND, free forever. And then we keep the price point really low for everybody else as well. But we're open to conversations. So get in touch and we'll be able to set you up.
Cool. Last thing from me, just to remind everyone to repost, share, like, subscribe, all that stuff. nothing else left for me to say other than thanks, Sophie. Really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you
And
so much for having me. It's great.
yeah, and we'll touch base again next week. Well,
Absolutely.
we're meeting next week, aren't we? So
we are, yeah. Thank you
um,
so much.
and thanks to everyone else who's listening.